What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the In Faith Podcast. My name is David, as always, joined by Steve,
I'm glad to be here.
and we are starting a new story here. We just finished up with Samson, right? In this series, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
In this series of difficult passages, and I think um, I'll let you talk more about the backside to the difficult passages. But as we were discussing it a while back to get into difficult passages, it seems very fascinating to me because once you start reading some of this, especially in Judges where we've been, there's a lot that goes on that's kind of hard to understand. So the title speaks for itself, but there's a lot of things that are hard to understand on and gets us asking like why did it end up that way? Why didn't God intervene? Why didn't? And we're gonna probably ask that same question today as we go into the story of Jephthah, which takes place a little bit further back than where we were with Samson by just a few chapters.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this period of time is a interesting period of time where Israel has just come into their land, just come into the promised land. So in the book of Joshua, we see the Israel taking over. We see them occupying their land, having to fight um, their enemies that lived in the land. and so they're doing that. They take into the land. They don't fully take all of the land that God had given them. But then after Joshua dies, there's no definitive leader, shall we say, of the Jews. There's no line to pass through. And one of the famous lines talking about the time period of Judges was, everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a time where God was essentially the ruler over Israel himself. There was no king ruling the people. There was no government formed. There were simply the people living in the land that God had given them. And they very quickly forgot the God that took them from Egypt and
Mm-hmm.
gave them this land. They very quickly slid into beliefs and ways of their enemies that they didn't fully take over. So God had warned them, if you don't, fully get rid of these people, um, they're going to mess you up. They're going to drag you down. They're going to still have their gods in front of you and stuff. And of course, that's exactly what happened. They were not able to fully take their land. So they still had um, people in the land worshiping idols, people in the land with their pagan traditions and stuff that were a snare to the people of Israel. And so in this period of time, the people of Israel would fall away from worshiping the one true God and would start worshiping the gods of their enemies. And God would raise up a ruler, and they're referred to as a judge. When we looked at Samson, he was a judge over Israel that God had raised up. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the difficult passages there were, well, why, if God is specifically raising someone up from his birth, even to be the judge over Israel, why did he use someone that didn't follow the oath that he was supposed to have um, to rule Israel? So I mean, that was, to me, Samson is difficult to begin with because God picked him from birth, and yet Samson never paid much attention, it seems like, to living the way that God had called him to live.
Oh, he almost did the opposite of everything he
Yeah.
was instructed not to do, but it was probably one of the most relatable people in the Bible to modern day walk.
Yeah. To what we end up doing. And And like you mentioned, Jephthah was a judge um, before Samson, but during the same time period.
Yeah.
And we see in looking at Jephthah, we see that falling back into practices, into pagan practices, through the influence of all those around them. So it becomes a difficult passage as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm looking through, a lot of this here, even the backstory of Jephthah. Um, so as we've mentioned, it takes place in the book of Judges. Um, but Jephthah was more or less known about, or the story of Jephthah, yeah, a leader who, after making a quick and fast vow to God, is actually faced with a very, very difficult and tragic situation
Right.
to deal with. We'll get into it, but he gets this victory, and he makes this vow to God, not really knowing what
Right.
exactly he was vowing to.
It's funny when you mentioned that he did that. I just hear in my head where uh, Jesus saying, "Let your yes be yes."
Yeah,
And your no be no. Very specifically, you don't need to swear. You don't need to make a vow. You don't need to do these things. Just when you say yes or no, that's what you're going to do. And besides, God doesn't require these oaths of us, these almost deal making with God, right? If you'll, and of course, plenty of us have done deal making with God. God, if you'll do this for me, then, I'll be in church every Sunday or whatever we say. Um, but that's never what God's calling us.
right.
God's not calling for our actions. He's calling for our hearts. He's calling for our lives. He's calling us to surrender to the better life that he will give us.
Well, and I think I wonder if he just got too ahead of himself, and it was a spur of the moment kind of decision, because if we think of his backstory, if we think of what all happened with Jephthah, let's start from birth.
Yeah.
Okay. He was illegitimate son of Gilead. He was driven out by his family, by his brothers, and became, um, what's it called? What's the word I'm looking for, Steve? My mind just drew a blank. They kind of outcasted him.
Yeah. An outcast.
But when Israel was threatened by the Ammonites, the elders of Gilead asked Jephthah to lead them. So it's kind of weird how at first they drove him out because he wasn't a child of marriage. He was a child of a prostitute. His um, father had him with a prostitute that wasn't his wife. So the brothers and the family and kind of everyone else around drove him out. And then when they were threatened, they were like, wait. Can you come back now and give us this victory?
Yeah.
We're being threatened. And then, to him, he's like, well, now you guys want me back? You guys wanted nothing to do with me when you found out who my mother was, and now you want me to come back and fight for you. But
Yeah.
we do see this.
David, just on that note there, the very first verse of chapter 11 in Judges, the story of Jephthah here,
Mhm.
it says, "Now Jephthah of Gilead was a great warrior." That's the first thing it says.
Yeah.
So I wonder if a piece of this is not them being afraid of Jephthah as well because of his skills, um, and because they've probably treated him wrong.
They didn't want him fighting for
Yeah,
the
they've
alternative.
treated him
Yeah.
wrong the whole time, because his dad messed up, and he was the son of a prostitute and all this, so they're all judgy on him. Not that any of this is Jephthah's fault, right? Jephthah has nothing to do with the way he's born, but it just feels like that they have a little fear of him. Also, is why they've run him off. I mean, that happens regularly.
Hmm.
if they didn't want him to really be a part of the family or anything like that, but they didn't fear him, they might use him, so to say, to do all the stuff that they don't want to have to do. But if they fear him, they're going to run him off, and that's what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what they did. And then when they were under attack, they wanted to come back to him and say, "Hey,
Yeah,
can you come fight for us?" And I think you're onto something there. They didn't want him fighting for the other team,
yeah,
but he agrees. He agrees, but he agrees on the condition that if he returned victorious, that um he became victorious, that he would rule Gilead. That was the condition that if I'll do it, but if I win, I rule Gilead.
yeah. But I think within him saying that, I'm just looking at verse 9 now. We hear from Jephthah, like, better, to me, a better way of looking things than we ever heard from Samson. So Jephthah here in verse 9, Jephthah says to the elders, let me get this straight. If I come with you, and if the Lord gives me victory over the Ammonites, will you really make me ruler over all the people? And of course, they go on to say, the Lord is our witness. We promise to do whatever you say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just keep going. 11. So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him the ruler and commander of the army at Mizpah. In the presence of the Lord, Jephthah repeated what he had said to the elders. So, I mean, Jephthah from the beginning is acknowledging that any victory is in the Lord, that
Yeah,
it's
amen.
God that is behind this. And he wants to recognize God up front. He doesn't say, if I get victory. He says, if the Lord gives me victory,
Yeah, amen.
you're going to make me people. So, I mean, we just see, it seems like Jephthah has all of this right when he goes in front of them. He's not, he's not vindictive. He's not doing anything against these people that ran him off. And he's acknowledging that any victory is a victory of the Lord.
Yeah, and he's so up until I want to say up until the point he got too ambitious. He before going into battle, he vowed that if he returned victorious, he would sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house to greet him.
Yeah,
And
bad idea.
that was that vow he made to God. And that's what we're going to get into to see kind of how this was kind of made it into the difficult passages.
Yeah, and even before that, I think something comes up that sort of makes us see a different view of this. So in verse 13, where Jephthah sends a message, and in verse 12, Jephthah sends a message to the Ammonites, and then in verse 13, they're answering that. The king of Ammon answered Jephthah's messengers. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they stole my land
Mm.
from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River and all the way to the Jordan. Now then, give back the land peaceably. Jephthah sent this message back to the Ammonite king. This is what Jephthah says. Israel did not steal any land from Moab or Ammon. When the people of Israel arrived at Kadesh on their journey from Egypt after crossing the Red Sea, they sent messengers to the king of Edom asking for permission to pass through the land, but their request was denied. Then they asked the king of Moab for similar permission, but he wouldn't let them pass through either. So the people of Israel stayed in Kadesh. It goes on, um, noting, I guess I got to keep reading it now. I've dug us into it. Finally, they went around Edom and Moab through the wilderness. They traveled along Moab's eastern border and camped on the other side of the Arnon River. but they never once crossed the Arnon River into Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. Then Israel sent messengers to King Sihon of the Ammonites, who ruled from Heshbon, asking for permission to cross through his land to get to their destination. But King Sihon didn't trust Israel to pass through his land. Instead, he mobilized his army at Jahaz and attacked them. But the Lord, the God of Israel, gave his people victory over King Sihon. So Israel took control of the land of the Amorites, who lived in the region from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River and the eastern wilderness to the Jordan. So you see, it was the Lord, the God of Israel, who took away the land from the Amorites and gave it to Israel. Why then should we give it back to you? So that, like I said, is that different viewpoint. The people of the land feel like their land has been stolen, but they can't go back. I mean, out of fear, because they know these people were being led by the God who brought the plagues on Israel. They're very versed. They know those plagues. They know that happened. So their fear, instead of saying we have no way of fighting the God that can do these miracles
Mm-hmm.
and inviting them through, I mean, as basically they're the way that they could know this God, the one true God. But they want to stay in control. And because they want to stay in control and because they're afraid, not only did they not let them pass through, now they went to war with them instead and lost. So then Jephthah again is making the point, hey, it is the Lord who gave us this land.
Yeah.
So don't come over here and fight us now.
One, I like how the initial message of requesting to pass through the land didn't stop them.
Yeah.
Even though they were denied, they didn't say, "Oh, well, we can't get through now. We're just going to have to table this." No, they said, "Okay, well, we'll get to where we're going and we'll go around." And now might be a detour, might be a longer trip,
Yeah.
but we're going to get there. We're going to get there the way we say we're going to get there, regardless if you let us cross through your land or make us go around.
Right.
So they didn't let they didn't let that detour them, but it does. We do see that picture here that we see God at the forefront
Yeah.
from the start, and that reliance and guidance on direction from Jephthah, even before he even agreed to lead them into battle.
Yeah.
We see him saying, if God grants us victory, like you emphasized on, he brought all glory to God there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like you say, we see Jephthah doing all the right things. And really, if the problem starts, as you've hinted at already.
Is that on 29?
Yes.
Is that I was looking, that's why I kind of went back to you for a sec, because I was looking to see, I'm like, wait, where did we end on? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you were at verse 29 there. I think verse 29, it, you know,
it is with a start of
and it's more difficult even almost that it says, at that time, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. So not only is he giving glory to God through all of this, that God is the victor, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon him as he's looking for an army here. And yet, he still makes the oath
yeah,
that
he
you were
does.
starting to mention.
He does right in verse 30
Yeah.
of Judges 11. It says Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, saying, "If you really do hand the Ammonites over to me, then whoever the first to come through the doors of my house to meet me When I return safely from fighting the Ammonites, he will belong to the Lord, and I will offer him up as a burnt sacrifice. I get this feeling that he had somebody in mind already. He may or may not have, but he had somebody in mind. He definitely had
He
a
never wanted that dog anyway. So.
yeah. It's like he kind of had a feeling the first to greet him, and he was like, "Well, it could be this person, this person. That's fine, whatever. It's for the Lord. That's what that's what I'll do."
So it's interesting with yours. Does yours use does yours use he as a
It does
pronoun?
use he
So this is a
in the
new
NET.
the New Living Translation. For some reason, that's what I'm in.
It
Um,
changes from week to week.
I
That's
know,
why I'm like,
I know, I know. I'm usually in the NET
because I
or something
changed it to
else.
NET to match yours last time,
Here I am throwing a
and
wrench
then
at you,
you're throwing a wrench.
throwing a wrench. But so the New Living Translation says, "I will give to the Lord whatever comes out of my house to meet me when I return in triumph. I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." So I don't know. So now we know the NET uses uses pronouns pertaining to people. I just want to see real fast, what does a New King James do? If you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt
Mm.
offering. Uh,
I think regardless, he didn't know what he didn't expect.
he didn't know, but I mean, I wondered if I thought maybe for a minute since I was in the NLT if it was giving a kinder translation, so to
Mm.
say, because to use a pronoun he, makes it seem like that he knew it would be a person coming out of the house.
Yeah.
And the other two that we just looked at, um, it says whatever rather than whoever,
Yeah.
and it says it instead of he. So that's to me that's kind of a big difference, though.
Yeah.
I
Maybe.
mean, if he's specifically expecting to sacrifice a person,
Yeah.
is different than thinking whatever animal comes running out, I'll sacrifice.
Yeah. He might have thought it would have been the dog or an animal or something. I don't know. But that was his vow. First thing to walk out of the house and greet me will be the sacrifice. So Jephthah, after making that vow in verse 32, Jephthah approached the Ammonites to fight with them, and the Lord handed them over to him. He defeated them from what is that? Orower?
Oh, sorry,
No, that's
I was looking up the English Standard Version. It also uses whatever and
whatever.
it instead. So the NET is, as far as we can tell so far, sort of on an island by itself
Yeah.
of suggesting that he knew it would be a person. Um, the other versions have not translated it in that manner. They have left it open to it could be an animal, it could be whatever comes out of his house first. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So he went, we read in verse 33 that he went through 20 cities in all fighting the Ammonites. And in 34, when Jephthah came home to Mizpah, there was his daughter hurrying out to meet
No,
him,
just say
dancing to the
no.
rhythm, of the tambourines. She was his only child, her, he had no, except for her,
He had no
he had
son or
no
daughter.
son or other daughter.
Yeah.
So this was his only child. When he saw her, he ripped his clothes off and said, "Oh no, my daughter, you have completely ruined me. You have brought me disaster. I made an oath to the Lord and cannot break it."
Hmm.
So if you think of it like right away, he seems like, man, this isn't. This isn't how it was supposed to be.
Mm-mm.
But he doesn't feel he can go back on it.
And
But at the same
sadly,
time, she has no idea what she was just running out excited
yeah,
to see him. So
see
she
her
was
dad.
dancing to the rhythm of the tambourines. So she was just happy that for him to be home. So and then he's ripping his clothes off, right? And he's saying, "Man, you messed it all up. You ruined me. I gotta uphold this oath now. It wasn't supposed to be you." And she has no clue. I can't imagine she has any clue that like, what are you talking about?
Right. No, she doesn't. Oh, for I have opened, just reading what he said here, and now I'm in the ESV. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow.
Yeah.
It's okay. So that's and generally we would consider this a good thing, other than God doesn't require us to make vows with Him,
Right.
and He doesn't then go to God. So he's made this vow already, one sided deal. God didn't ask for it, but he offered it. And now he's like saying, well, I can't take it back. I offered it, but he doesn't go to God. He's talking with his daughter, and explaining what's going to have to happen. Um, but it seems to me what should have happened, um, rather than him telling her how, her coming out has messed him up because of this oath. He should have been ripping his clothes and praying to God and asking,
Maybe for some forgiveness there.
yeah, I obviously made a rash oath here. You gave me the victory. And yeah,
I've made rash oaths before. But
yep.
I mean, never at the expense of sacrificing somebody coming out of my house. I've made like these oaths that I probably couldn't hold up, that I could hold up but just didn't. It's just those, oh, if you come through for me this one last time, Lord, I'll start going to church, or I'll start doing this, or I'll put this away, or I'll stop doing this. We make these vows that aren't necessarily yet required to at least as far as the salvation goes. I mean, or God coming through for us. I mean, God will come through for us when it lines up with his plan for us. I mean, it's just, that's what it kind of reminds me of, is this ambition to please the Lord when all he really wanted was your heart to begin with.
Well, so maybe this is me having an odd view,
Go for it.
but you think about being able to make deals with people, right? You have to have, I don't know how to put it, a certain standing, so to say,
Yeah.
to be able to make deals with them. Anyhow, you have to be in a position in which you can do something for the person that you're making these rash oaths to. So, David, if I said to you, man, if you just, if you fix my car, then I'm going to be there for you every time, you know, whatever, every time your bank account turns up zero, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to make this up to you. Um, that's something where you're like, all right, I'll hold you to that. I'll fix your car. And then the next time I need some money, you're going to hear from me. But if we're doing it with God, there is nothing that God needs from us. And for us to act like we can offer God something is a little arrogant in itself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't really go that far in our thought. We're just desperate and we want something. But we have nothing to offer God to start with. So, we're not on a level to make a deal with God. anyhow, that's just sort of the thought that runs through my head when thinking about offering God things, making a a rash oath with God.
So what that kind of reminds me of, we're gonna go down this rabbit hole.
Let's do it.
What is it then? Because I think we all get into this space where we do. I think it's just it's a part of our natural um, instinct to want to repay good deeds.
Like
So it's you're more prone to, repaying a deed to somebody who is constantly there for you or you're close to, and God holds the criteria for all of that.
yeah,
God's somebody who's constantly there for us,
yeah.
and he's constantly showing up for us. We are going to come into those times where we're like, how can we give back? But exactly, how do you give back something to God? How do you give back when he doesn't need anything from us?
Yeah. I
We give him our thanks. We give him the glory. We give him the praise and the worship, which is all kind of what he's wanting from us is
which he wants for our benefit.
right.
He wants us to acknowledge him because if we don't acknowledge him and things, we'll start believing lies. We'll start believing that we're the ones in control.
Mhm.
We'll start believing that we're the ones that make the stuff happen. We don't need God. We do it ourselves. But the
The
truth is,
arrogance.
and us wanting control,
Mm-hmm.
because we are a people for sure that want control of our situations. It shouldn't take us long at all to figure out we just don't. We don't have control of our situations. There's no doubt. We can't make people do other things. We can't, make the world work with us. We don't have control. But making these rash vows is almost seems like a way of trying to gain a little control over it, as if I had a hand in this. This victory occurred. God gave me this victory because I made a vow, and now I'm going to keep it.
Well, and here's where things kind of go a little deeper. So he's clearly upset and tells his daughter that he can't break the vow he made. And in verse 36, she responds and says to him, "My father, since you have made an oath to the Lord, do to me as you promised. After all, the Lord vindicated you before your enemies, the Ammonites." She then said to her father, "Please grant me this one wish. For 2 months, allow me to walk through the hills with my friends and mourn my virginity." So he grants her that. He says in 38, "You may go." He permitted her to leave for 2 months. She went with her friends and mourned her virginity as she walked through the hills. That Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
That sounds a little odd. Walk through the hills with your friends, mourn your virginity. So is she just trying to rid of it and then before she sacrificed?
Well, no, I think
What's the
she's
setting behind this?
right. I hear what you're saying. She's not. It sounds like she's a true believer too, right? She believes in the Lord. She believes that if he makes an oath, he should keep it to
Right?
God.
Because she
And
did state,
even though she's the on the wrong end of this deal, so she's basically just asked to spend time with her friends, and it's not. I don't think just mourning her virginity, but mourning that she didn't get to move through all the other cycles of life, right? She didn't get to grow up. She didn't get to get married. She didn't get to have kids of her own. So I don't think this is a say nice way of her wanting to go out and have a wild time before she's killed. I think it's actually just her wanting time with her friends ahead of time. As you read it, though, what was
yeah,
in my head? In my head, I'm thinking, I bet Jephthah kind of wishes that she would run off and never come back.
Yeah. Well, and we do get the answer. Okay, we do get the answer as we continue reading. But as we read that, I just wanted to throw that out there a bit because I'm like, well, it is worded a little oddly, but we do read in verse 39 that after 2 months she returned to her father, and she did, or he did to her as he had vowed. She died a virgin. So that's ultimately what she was mourning. You kind of hit the nail on the head. She was mourning the fact that she didn't get to finish out the rest of the cycles of her life. Um, but yeah, she returned, and her father did as he vowed. And we read in continuing in 39, her tragic death gave rise, to a custom in Israel. So every year, Israelite women, I don't know why I'm going to struggle with commemorate. There we go. Commemorate the daughter of Jephthah for 4 days. So what happens during this 4 days, Steve?
I don't know
I would like to
that.
look into it, how they celebrate this, or commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, because it's. I hope they don't just go around sacrificing each other.
No.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to like. No, but 2 months. You got to think how heavy on his heart was that he had to. This had to sit in the back of his mind for 2 months.
Yeah.
But like you said too, here's another one that kind of sparks the interest and gets the gears moving in my brain. You said you had mentioned something earlier that he made this vow, and even after he made the vow, and even after his daughter came out, he didn't not once go to the Lord about it.
Uh-uh.
He didn't go to God about it. So I'm thinking 2 months she wanted to leave. She wanted to go walk through the hills with her friends for 2 months. She was gone for 2 months. That's, to me, that's 2 months that he could have gone and asked for an alternative, a forgiveness, or God, what do you want me to really do? That was, um, I kind of spur of the moment decision. Do you really want me to sacrifice my daughter? Now, if God came back and said yes, it's a different story. But not once, again, kind of capitalizing on the comment you made, not once did he go to the Lord
Well,
with this situation.
yeah, and I think not only so he didn't. We see that to begin with. Why didn't he go back to God? But then, I also have this further thought. I think about Abraham with Isaac, where God stepped in. Firstly, I mean, that's a little different because God had told Abraham, you need to take your son, your only son, and go up this mountain and sacrifice him for me. So God said that to Abraham. And Abraham was obedient. And he took Isaac, he took him with him, and he took him up on that mountain, and he bound him, and he put him on an altar, and he had a knife in his hand, and he raised it. And then God stepped in and said, do not harm the child. And there was a goat stuck in the bushes. And that's what was sacrificed. So, part of it, you think of this, you're going, yeah, but God stepped in and stopped Abraham. We want to, or at least I want to see God step in here. Jephthah has been.
I almost do too, but at the same time, and I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go.
Because I do too. It's like I was waiting this whole time for God to step in, and then we read she came back, and her father did as he promised or as he vowed. Right. But there was also a lot more detail in the sacrifice on the hill where God did step in. He was instructed to take his son up for an offering,
Yeah.
not knowing, Jephthah wasn't instructed to sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house. That was his own kind of ambition.
Yeah.
And the more I think about it, and I said it earlier, I really don't think he anticipated it being his daughter, wife, loved one, or any of that.
Yeah.
But I think that's why God showed up with um why am I so off today? The with the ram on the hill.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice. But that's why God showed up there. He didn't let him sacrifice his son. Even though that was the kind of instruction, it was more of a test of faith or a test of obedience. And then God provided that sacrifice. And I think had this kind of been the same calling, maybe he would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But there was no calling to make a sacrifice to God, uh, pending victory here. And I mean, what's a big takeaway we can get from this, aside of don't make irrational deals with God, spur of the moment? More or less, I mean, he was on the right track the whole way. He was on the right track with giving God the praise. He was on the right track with, if we get victory, it's going to be God willing. And all the way up until the battle. And then he kind of makes this rational decision that he was going to sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house. Turns out to be his daughter. But I also find it hard to deal with that his daughter was so willing as well. I mean, it doesn't say she was too happy about it. It doesn't say, we don't see any of that, and we can't assume. We do see a little disappointment, I guess, but she's not. I believe you're right. We see that she has a lot of faith in the Lord. She too is a believer, so she tells her dad, don't go back on your vow. Do to me exactly what you vowed God you would do, but before you do, let me at least kind of take this last journey. And that's exactly what kind of happened there. And he lets her take the journey, comes back, and then another thing that kind of, and this is just me getting into the story and setting the scene. It seemed to happen pretty fast. We don't see anything left after that. Aside of the Israelite women, they kind of honor the daughter of Jephthah every year for 4 days. But all we see is that when she returned, he did what he vowed and left it there. So we don't get to see, and maybe we do as we continue reading, but we'll have to continue reading in Judges 12 next week on a new episode. But to follow up kind of where we're at and what we've gone through so far, Steve, what do you think what do you think the set of the scene is here right after all this kind of comes about, but now we have a whole town that celebrates her every year?
Yeah. So part of what I was doing as you were going through was trying to look.
Good. It's the water. Water went down the wrong hole. That happens to me all the time.
Hits it.
Yeah. So it is that time of year, man. These allergies get kicked up, and I also think my son's out there cutting the yard too, stirring up all the pollen there. But yeah, setting the scene. Where do you think we're at now? I mean, my mind is going in 20 different directions in trying to relate to, what what Jephthah has to go through now that he has sacrificed his only child.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying, that what it's almost like, what is his state of mind at this point now? How is your relationship with God after something like this happens? Though he's caused it, right? By making the rash vow. He makes a rash vow to God. He feels like he has to keep it. But now where is he? Why, is he going to fall into that trap that many of us fall into, of now blaming God? Why did you make me sacrifice my daughter? No, God didn't. But in Jephthah's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
it might be, that might be how he feels about it, because he's thinking, I'm doing what you call me to do. I made a vow and I kept it, but that vow was more costly than I ever thought it would be. So I'm afraid Jephthah's response to all this was to sort of cut off his connection with God.
Yeah.
Because, we see it right away. He doesn't go to God. And like you mentioned, he had 2 months of time that he could have, and I would suggest should have, been struggling with God the whole time and with this decision. But he doesn't seem to flinch on that decision. We don't hear about him during the 2 months. But as soon as she comes back, he sacrifices her, and that's that.
Yeah.
But I feel like his connection with God is sort of severed at that point.
It very well, yeah, could be. And his trials aren't over yet.
No.
It doesn't end there.
Mm-mm.
All stemming from this battle, we're going to get to see a lot of civil strife
Yes.
going into the next chapter.
Yeah, his reactions are very different going into the next chapter.
And I think that's where we get to see where his decision lands his relationship. So join us next week as we continue on in the story with Jephthah. We'll be in Judges 12, and we'll get to see kind of how this rational decision, this rational vow that he made in the spur of the moment now is affecting his relationship with God moving forward.
Yeah.
So we thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week. God bless.